All right, I am all that stands between you guys and lunch, which means that I'm going to start talking very slowly. I'm kidding. I'm a software project manager, and so I have timed my words to exactly 19 minutes and 43 seconds. And I see all my QA people taking out their stopwatches. So good job for you guys. As was said, my name is Anjuan. I love shipping software. Shipping software is something that I've had the honor of doing for almost 2 decades. And I just love getting working software into the hands of users. I love shipping software so much that it's something that I just say everywhere. We gotta ship, right? And I'm known for a phrase that shipping covers a multitude of sins. That if you get software shipped out, then you will be able to usually be forgiven of other mistakes. Now, while my identity as a technologist is a big part of who I am, a bigger part of who I am is a father. I have 3 kids. They are ages 10, 9, and 7. And I love them all. But I would have to say that my daughter has a special place in my heart. I love the way that she laughs, the way that her eyes widen when she laughs. I love the jokes that she tells. She's hilarious. And I love being a geek dad, seeing her get involved in math and science and other aspects of what you learn in 1st grade. A few months ago, my wife let me know that she wanted to talk to me about something that happened to my daughter at school. So I came home from work and I thought, okay, so what? She learned to spell a new word. We should get her into that Scripps National Spelling Bee and get going with that because I think that she'll be killer. But the news that my wife had to share was something that was unexpected, but not unsurprising. My daughter is the only black student in her 1st grade class, and they were giving an assignment to draw a picture of their family. And so my daughter started doing that, and so she drew a picture of her 2 brothers, she drew a picture of my wife, her mom, of course, and then she drew a picture of me. And then one of the students looked over at that picture and said, "You drew your dad wrong. He should be holding a gun and surrounded by dead bodies because he's black." Needless to say, we had to have a parent-teacher conference after that and deal with that situation. And I would like to say that that was the first time that my wife and I have had to deal with helping our children navigate the black experience at school, but it wasn't. And I'm sure that it will not be the last. And I'm sharing this experience with you because diversity in technology is often presented as a numbers game. We saw huge companies like Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, and others jumpstart the diversity in technology discussion a couple of years ago by publishing their diversity numbers. However, while numbers are necessary, they are insufficient to fully solve the diversity problem in tech. In fact, many of you probably saw those numbers and thought, well, what does that have to do with me? After all, I'm just a developer, or maybe I'm a system admin or a software project manager, and I've never done anything horrible. I've never shot up a church full of people simply because of the color of their skin. I've never groped a woman in a bar. And you're right. Those behaviors are horrible, and I'm glad that everyone in here has never taken part in them. But neither did my daughter's 1st grade classmate. But her actions were still destructive. Diversity is not primarily a numbers game. It is a perceptions game. And these perceptions really are easy to understand. After all, you don't have to be much smarter than a 1st grader to get them. In many ways, it's fitting that I'm giving this talk in Nashville, which is the capital of Tennessee, the last state to secede from the Union right before the Civil War. Alexander Stephens, who was the vice president of the Confederacy, which included this state and my home state of Texas, when the war began to break out, he gave a speech about the new nation that the southern states had created. It's just called the Cornerstone Speech. And I quote, "Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rest upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is its natural and normal condition." And while you may take out slavery from that term, you could replace Negro with women, with gay people, lesbians, transgendered, the handicapped. There was a pecking order in that time, and it was clear who was at the top. And although the Confederacy ended many, many years ago, it's been about 150 years, and the violence of the Civil War has ended, we are still subject to these perceptions. And it's easy to see how damaging these perceptions are when acts of violence are reported in the news, but the subtle ways that they affect our society are far more destructive. While flags can be removed from state capitals and we can tear down statues, the perceptions that drive inequality are much harder to destroy. And I believe that we in the technology sector are far more vulnerable to the pain caused by a lack of diversity precisely because we think that we're different, right? Talk is cheap, show me the code, right? That's what we say. However, we're not different. We're not immune. Yet I do think that we are positioned to solve diversity in our sector in ways that other sectors are not. Now, I've been developing software at the enterprise level for almost 20 years. I've done implementations of custom software. I've done consumer off-the-shelf software like Oracle and SAP. And so I know the types of thinking and the problem solving that goes into making software. And I challenge everyone here today to think of the technology sector as a software system and the lack of diversity as bugs in that system. And I think that by thinking this way, you will see that you already have what it takes to not only understand the diversity problem that we have in tech, but I think that you understand your role in making things better. So the diversity debugging tools are based on tools that we know by making code, right? That's expected behavior, tracing, refactoring, and sample code. So let's start with the principle of expected behavior. So I'm a scrum master for a team that is desperately trying to ship software. And we have a lot of bugs. In fact, I've seen so many bugs that I see them everywhere, right? I go to the supermarket, and when I check it out, I see how buggy the retail experience is, right? I hate going through checkout lines. It's such a broken experience. And I've been married for 13 years, and I have a lot of friends who have gotten divorced, and they've begun dating again. And a lot of my buddies bring their younger girlfriends to meet me. And so when I see the bugs in that situation, I have to just tell myself, defer to the next release. Defer to the next release. Hold your tongue, let it go. But back to my team. So we're fixing the defects that have been reported by our QA team. And I often have to remind my team that the first step in understanding a bug is knowing the expected behavior of the feature. And we can apply this to debugging diversity in tech. And that's the principle of expected behavior. We cannot understand the problems caused by a lack of diversity in tech without knowing the expected behavior of technology environments. Whether it's a workplace, a conference, or a happy hour, most white males in tech understand and benefit from the behavior patterns they expect from others. However, they often fail to see how underrepresented groups are often denied those benefits. Let me give you an example. I have a friend who is the founder of a successful startup called The Muse. And Catherine has shared an experience that I've heard echoed by many women in technology. So she goes to a happy hour where other founders are meeting to just talk shop and share battle stories and whatnot. And not every time, but often enough, while she's there talking with other founders, someone would turn to her and say, so whose boyfriend are you? Now, how many white males in here have been mistaken for someone's boyfriend at a happy hour, right? I don't see any hands. Right, white males. And maybe, okay, I don't see any hands, right? But it's something that happens to women often. It's something that women have to deal with, and it's something that is an expected behavior that while white men benefit from, women often don't enjoy. And we see that people of color, women, member of the LGBT group, are exposed on an almost daily basis to behavior that the majority culture in tech would never expect. The ability to see these lapses in expected behavior is vital to helping the technology sector understand that the key problem behind diversity is a lack of inclusiveness. So let's go to tracing. So we all know tracing, right? You know that software is often so subtle, you often can't see the code actually running. And so you output the results, maybe to a text file, to a screen. And by doing that, it's easy to see any defects in the underlying code. And just as you can trace code to detect small defects in it, you can also turn on your diversity tracers and see the often subtle ways that women and minorities are often excluded from the information and even exposed to microaggressions that men often totally don't see. So let me give you another example. There's a friend of mine who's a woman of color, and she's often been the only black person on her IT team. And she once worked with a coworker who had ridiculous ideas about black people. He assumed that she had been abused by her parents as a child. She assumed that her current boyfriend abused her. And it's amazing that someone who was abusing her was so fascinated by her fictitious history of abuse. She went on to other tech jobs, and she was often compelled to join the team at beer taverns, even though she hates beer. She was often forced, in fact, she felt forced to learn classic rock songs. And you guys may love classic rock. She simply wasn't a fan. But in order to play rock band with her friends, she had to learn classic rock. And around the office, when there was someone new to the office, she would often be mistaken for an administrative assistant or a member of the security team. And she was a developer. And her experience is the norm for what people of color often go through in tech. We all too often have to lose our lives to earn a living. Now, if someone had their diversity tracers on, maybe they could have spotted this. For example, why do we assume that everyone wants to drink alcohol? Even if the majority do, that's fine, but be sensitive to those who don't. And we can all step through the cultural code of our workplace and see if anyone is being hurt by it. You simply need the willingness to pay attention. All right, let's go to refactoring. So the principle of refactoring is similar to the principle of what we do with code, that we refactor it, and that we change the internal workings and structure of the code in order to make it easier to maintain, easier to read. And so by improving the internal structure, we don't want to break the functionality, we want it to simply run better. Now, diversity refactoring is a good way for technologists to begin making the technology industry a more inclusive one. And so this is the process of improving the internal structure and design of how women and minorities are viewed in tech. So here's an example of how we can refactor diversity. A few years ago, a famous founder of a technology company explained what he called the airport test. And so when he would interview candidates, one way that he would determine if the candidate would be a good fit would be answering the question, if I was stuck at an airport with this person, would I enjoy it? And so because this is a very visible founder, a lot of people began using the airport test when they were doing interviews. But I think that's a horrible way to hire people, especially if you want a diverse workplace. First, how does a hiring manager's personal taste determine if someone is fit for a job? Second, the airport test is often used to see, will this candidate fit the culture of the company? Well, if your culture is mostly white males, then guess who usually fails the airport test? People who are not white males. And really, how many hiring managers have been stuck at an airport with a black person or with often a woman? And so the airport test is a way to perpetuate a non-diverse environment. So let's refactor the airport test into the workplace test. Instead of wondering if you wouldn't mind being stuck at an airport with a candidate, just ask, how have you solved problems at your previous workplace? How have you reduced the amount of bugs that happen after we push code to production? How have you helped people who are new to the team be integrated and begin producing value? The workplace test takes the I out of the selection process that's put there by the airport test and replaces it with the needs of your company. So let's stop trying to hire cultural rock stars. Let's make the company the rock star by making it more inclusive. All right, sample code, right? So there's the principle of sample code, and that's simply the idea that when you're dealing with a bug in software, often it helps if someone has already solved that problem. Maybe they have code that's in production, or they have it in a local branch, and they just say, oh yeah, I did this here. And they simply lend you the code to help you find bugs easier. Now, in the same way that you can lend someone code, you can also lend privilege. And this is the diversity debugging principle of sample code. And you can do this by helping women and minorities get access to information and events that often naturally flow to the dominant demographic at most technology companies. So men, when you hear about a golf outing that the fellas talked about playing pickup basketball during lunch, let the women know, right? And if you're having a discussion about technology, and I've seen this over and over again, where the woman who wrote the code is right there, but they're ignoring her, simply turn to her and say, I'd like to hear what she has to say. And by doing that, you're lending your male privilege to women to help them contribute to the environment and also be recognized. Now, I did this a couple of years ago when I was doing a proposal for South by Southwest Interactive. Now, it's a very competitive process to get a proposal accepted into South by. And having been successful a couple of times before, I knew that one of the key parts of being successful is who you have on your proposal. Now, there were many men who I knew in the technology sector who I was close enough to ask them. But my talk was about design. And I had just met a designer who was a woman from Mexico who I thought would be great. Now, that was a bit of a risk because, again, having a man may have been a little bit easier from the standpoint of having a visible person, but I wanted to lend her my privilege of being a man and also having spoken at South by before to help her have the credential of having spoken at South by. And so we teamed up together, we submitted our proposal, and it got accepted. And she used that experience to the next year submit her own panel, and that got accepted. And she's gone on to make her own startup, and she's been doing really well. And by doing that, I gave her a credential so that when she walks into the door of a conversation with founders about funding or to get mentors, she's not just a Mexican woman. She's someone who spoke at South by. And that has helped her tremendously in her journey of being a startup founder. So I know that you guys have heard me talk and you have heard about these diversity debugging tools, and you may be asking, well, what do I do with this, right? I've hopefully empowered you with ways to debug the diversity issues in tech, but I want to offer a suggestion of what you can do. Now, often when we talk about marginalized groups in technology, it's often women talking with women, people of color talking with other people of color, members of the LGBT group talking with other members of LGBT. But why don't these conversations happen among people who have privilege? So you can start by finding someone who has a privilege that you have. So if you have male privilege, find another man and talk about what people who lack male privilege go through. Pull a guy to the side and say, dude, Gamergate? And just talk about it. If you're a straight guy, Or a straight woman, right? Find someone who is a member of LGBT. Who's not a member, and just talk about issues that affect the LGBT community. Maybe gay marriage, right? The Supreme Courts may issue a ruling really shortly about that. Have that conversation. And so consider this your pull request. And like all pull requests, you're saying, I'm going to divert from the way that technology and diversity are thought about in the main and try to share how my thinking has changed. And hopefully that thinking will be merged into the main line and we can all enjoy more diverse technology environments together. So those are your pull requests. Please use them wisely and enjoy lunch.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.